Hi folks, I've just moved into my new studio, so I figured now would be a good time to talk about the most boring piece of gear I've got in my studio. Yet it's one of the biggest time savers ever. Let's talk about patchbays. So, what's a patchbay and why would you need one? Well, a patchbay is simply a bunch of jacks and you connect all your studio gear to the back of it. Then on the front you can route any output to any input, simply by connecting a patch cable. Just like a Eurorack really. The main benefit is that you don't have to crawl underneath your desk in the dark, hoping to find the right cable. But not everyone needs a patchbay. If you've got a large audio interface with more inputs than you'll ever need, then a patchbay isn't necessary at all. Only when you've got more scenes or output devices than inputs on your interface would you need a patchbay. Even then, I would probably recommend a mixer first, if you have the space. But if you're like me and a 32 channel mixer still isn't enough to connect everything, then a patchbay comes in handy. So let me walk you through my patchbay setup, how I label everything, and I'll explain a bit about normaling. Right, so I'm using a Neutrik 1/4 inch TRS patchbay here. In professional recording studios you'll typically see TT patchbays that look a little bit like mini jacks and can fit twice the amount of inputs in the same space as one of these. Unfortunately, these cost around €1,000, which is way over my budget, while these units only cost like €60. That's not a small difference. The only thing that does cost a bit more is that I'm using jack cables on the rear as well. While on most professional patchbays you can use D-sub or DB25 connectors, or you can even solder your cables directly to the patchbay. The Neutrik jacks I use only cost me about €2 a piece, so still not that big of a deal. But something to keep in mind. For the multi-cables or snakes I'm using, I've bought some from a live sound company, but I've also got some Mogami and some summer cables. I think summer cables are a great value for the money. They're very flexible, pretty easy to solder and easy to identify. Because the cheaper cables have got these numbers on them that are printed pretty badly, so I had a hard time connecting everything. But in the end, it's all just a piece of copper. So once it's all connected, it won't matter much. One thing that is important though, is that you try to keep your audio cables as far away from power cables as possible. In my desk, I've zip-tied everything on one side, away from the power connectors. If you ever need to cross a power line, try to cross it perpendicular, so it won't pick up much electromagnetic interference. Alright, on to the actual patchbay. Each patchbay has 2 rows of 24 jacks. The top row are always outputs and the bottom row are the inputs. So on top I've got the direct outputs from my mixer for example, and on the bottom are the inputs on my ferrofish converter. Now the cool thing is that without patching any cables in the front, a connection is already made from top to bottom. This patchbay is half normaled, meaning a connection is present unless I connect a patch cable in the bottom row, so on the input side. As soon as I do this, the internal connection is broken. But when I connect the cable to the top row, so the output, the internal connection is still present, meaning I can send one output to 2 destinations. In this case, my ferrofish converter, but maybe I also want to send it through some outboard effects units. That's great, because then I can record both the dry, unaltered signal and a processed signal. I just did this yesterday, by the way, to record guitar with and without compression. Now what I really like about this patchbay is that you can change the normal mode by detaching these 2 screws right here. I can pop the front panel right off, and now there are these individual PCBs, which I can simply pull out. And one of these jacks is black and one is white. And now I can simply reverse the PCB to turn it from half normaled into a full split. So the white jack is the one that breaks the connection when you patch your cable in there. So in this case the white jack is on top and I use this with outboard equipment for example. So when I've got an outboard EQ or compressor and I've got my outputs on top and inputs right below it, I don't want to normal these, otherwise it would cause feedback on some devices. The output is literally patched to the input. So that's useful. Another thing you can do is to reverse the PCB and leave the top row disconnected and only plug a device into the bottom row. I use this for external preamps, So the output of my preamp is connected to the bottom rear input. And this means the internal connection still works. So now it works like a splitter. The same signal is present on both the top and bottom front connections. A classic trick is also to connect the bottom row to another bottom row right next to it. Now we've turned it into a multiple. So now I can patch one output to any of these 4 jacks. And the signal will be present on the other 3 jacks as well. Useful for splitting signals. This is exactly the same with Eurorack, by the way. But yeah, that's basically it. I've connected all my converters, mixer outputs and inputs and output gear to the patch bay. So I can create custom effect change simply by patching a few cables on the front. Everything is clearly labeled. I use a piece of software called PatchCat for that, which is very inexpensive, and it's perfect for planning out your patches. It's a bit like Excel, but it features all kinds of different patch bay models, meaning you can print out these labels and it will all fit perfectly. In my case, I just used sticker paper, printed it out and cut it with a paper cutter. I think I'm gonna relabel mine soon because I've already made some changes, and I guess I'll just visit a copy shop in the future so they can cut it for me, which saves some time. I think I also changed the colors around a bit because these are pretty hard to read. But yeah, you learn from experience. Alright, I think that's it. Not the most exciting piece of gear, but definitely a true time saver. You don't want to fiddle around with cables when inspiration strikes. Do the boring work up front and you'll reap the rewards when you're in the flow. Alright, cool. Let me know what you think or if you've got any questions. Check out my Facebook group to learn more about hardware setups. And I'll see you all next week with another tutorial.